Welcome to this edition of the DMZ America, the podcast. It is Sunday, August 24th. I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis. I'll be coming to you from the right.
And I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall, and I'll be coming to you from the left.
We probably should get a schedule. I mean, someday.
Yeah.
Given that our whole lives are deadlines and everything, you think we'd be used to these, but we kind of we crank these out when we crank these out. That's
It's true. It's true. I mean, and yet, we live in such an ordered world that,
Yes. Well, just to kind of backtrack a million steps, because this is our 219th episode of this podcast. What started it is once in a while you have to tee up and to remind the listeners, Ted. And so Ted and I are good friends. We're besties. And I call him. He calls me for personal crises. This friend of mine was a jerk. What do I do? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
What should I watch on Netflix tonight? The important stuff.
Yes, indeed.
But we do talk about, we love history. We love economics. We love philosophy. And so the conversations got pretty dense, and we thought, this might be a podcast that, 3 or 4 people might be interested in. And I overestimated by 50%, but yeah, that's pretty much where we are. So that's what you're listening to, is just two, I think, guys who follow politics and history on a granular level and try to tie it all together. And where are we today, Ted? What's our issue du jour? Because, history, what's that? Who said that? History doesn't repeat, but it echoes.
It rhymes.
It rhymes. I was rewatching, there was a mini series, believe it or not, years ago on the rise of Hitler. And it was really very good. I thought the actor.
Pro or con?
Well, it actually, you know what? I know you're laughing, but I mean, it showed him to be monstrous, but it also showed the raw politics that are, everywhere in politics. I've known Democrats, who were just as brutal in some ways. Obviously, they didn't have, they didn't have the night of the long knives yet, but they could have the.
They obviously haven't been to the DNC.
The night of the underage Chardonnay maybe will be the left now. But what's happening in America now, you and I, we're going to do a deep dive into this now because Washington, D.C. has been invaded by the National Guard as sent by Commander-in-Chief Trump, General Bone Spurs, as we like to call him. It was a preposterous exercise, and we'll go into that in a moment. But now he's threatening to do it to Chicago. He's going to do it to other democratically run cities, capital D Democrat. And so we're going to, is this wrong, Ted? Is sending a into U.S. cities, is this wrong? I think we can say, if we're taking a Socratic method here, I think Ted and I can both say, yep, yes, it is. It flies against the law. It flies against long-standing law, the Posse Comitatus Act.
Maybe you should explain that for people who aren't familiar with it.
It was, I think you may know the actual details better than me. It was a piece of legislation passed in the late 1800s that you could not send American troops, U.S. troops, certified American troops, into American cities to enforce any of the American laws, with good reason. You don't, because it's ridiculous force. It's preposterous, and it's threatening, and that's its function. Trump is not doing this because he cares about the people of Chicago or about the people of Washington, D.C. He could give 2 shits about that. What he gives it is that this is purely cosmetic. Let's look at what's happening in D.C. He sent troops into the National Mall and Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, if there's any place in Washington, D.C., you can walk around with your wallet duct taped to your forehead and feel perfectly safe, it would be the mall, the Capitol Mall, and it would be Pennsylvania Avenue, because there's enough police presence, people presence. He's not sending these troops to places where it matters. Now, if he does this to Chicago, Ted, he's not going to send them to places you may not even be familiar with, Austin and Inglewood. We had 600 homicides in Chicago last year, over 600 homicides. Most of them happened in the communities I just mentioned, overwhelmingly Black, overwhelmingly poor, grindingly poor. That's where the action is. But that's not where our brave troops are going to be deployed. It's going to be on the Mag Mile, the Magnificent Mile. It's going to be around Wrigleyville, where the threat, Ted, the rising threat of drunken suburban white men rages on unchecked. Chicago has a violent crime problem. I know this comes as a surprise. I hope you're sitting down, Ted.
I am sitting down. You can probably
but it always has. Now, the Posse Comitatus Act was enacted. Was that as I read this, as I say this, was this enacted by Southern Democrats? Because
it was. Yeah.
So they didn't like the troops showing up a few years before.
Right. So, yeah, this was 1878 or 1877, 1878. So we've talked about it here on the program a long time ago. We talked about the disputed centennial election of 1876 between Sam Tilden and Rutherford Hayes. And, we're not going to get into that detail here, but let's just say that basically that came down to, it was what's the word I'm looking for? A hangover from the Civil War. And as really much of the last of the 50 years following the Civil War were in American politics. And yes, Southern Democrats pushed it through. They basically said, we don't want troops on the streets of American cities. They were pissed off because the Union had sent Union troops down to Southern cities to enforce
and should have
Reconstruction in the South in order to sort of remind them who had lost the war. And
they were also doing that whole lynching thing. Which
now that said, that's right. It also harkened back, however, to the American Revolution, when there was a section about not quartering troops in your houses. There was still historical memory. Probably some people were still alive. Well, no, that's not true. But people certainly knew from their parents and grandparents about the history of British troops terrorizing American colonists. So, I mean, so basically that's how this got passed. And basically it's also, I think, even though it's some sketchy origins politically, I think it's an incredibly important law because it's what distinguishes the United States in some really important ways from other countries. If you go to a lot of countries, you will see very large men with very big guns and military hardware, or tanks or APCs out on the streets of cities. You'll encounter checkpoints it's a very intimidating thing. It's your interaction with the agents of the state, who, even if they're not corrupt, are scary as hell. And so this, one of the things that's great, or used to be great, about the United States was that you could drive thousands of miles, and if you didn't drive over the speed limit or make an illegal turn, you might never encounter any agent of the state. Right? You just cross the borders, no checkpoints, the police aren't going to pull you over. That's not true anymore. Now we have ICE agents intercepting Amtrak trains near the Canadian border and going through and demanding papers to prove that people are U.S. citizens, something that is not part of American law. You don't have to prove you're a U.S. citizen at all. You don't have to carry ID, but unless you drive a car, you have to have a driver's license. That's it. It's really disturbing. If you, as you know, Scott, having lived near the Mexican border in Arizona, for many years, not just with Trump, you started border and customs enforcement officers have checkpoints along the Mexico border on Interstate 10 and other state routes. And they stop, they basically slow down traffic. They look inside the cars. They see a brown face. They basically pull the person over. That's what they do. Near San Diego and places like that. And so, that's gotten worse and worse. And obviously this latest iteration where Trump is sending National Guardsmen, not in the case of a civil disturbance like the LA riot or, a hurricane like Katrina in New Orleans, but not to help, but, let's face it, it doesn't pass the smell test, right?
No.
I mean, he's basically saying, these are cities that have like extreme crime. Well, if this was about extreme crime, you'd probably start with the cities that have high crime. And those are places like Baltimore, Camden, New Jersey, St. Louis, Detroit, and these are cities where probably the mayors might even welcome the help. These are cities where these are democratic cities that don't want the help. And the National Guardsmen are not going to the most dangerous neighborhoods like Southeast Washington in order to, as you pointed out. So it's kind of like, well, you're not really there to fight crime, right? You say you're there for that, but you're not.
No, it's a photo op so Trump can walk amongst them and look, tough. I mean, it's a photo op, but it's a terrible, terrible photo op. If he actually sent National Guard to New York City, the chances are good that he'd send him to Times Square.
So the tourists can take selfies with them. It is I mean, I would suspect, right? I mean, look, New York City doesn't really have a significant violent crime problem the way that it did in the 70s and 80s. What it has is a major homelessness and blight problem. And that's an economic issue, and it's a social issue. The National Guard cannot and aren't going to help. Look, if they come in the rumor here is that Trump plans to go into Chicago, which has a lot of undocumented workers, and with ICE, and basically to make this about more mass deportations. I got to say, if they do that in New York, it's like that line from Casablanca, where the dude's talking, what's his name? Humphrey Bogart's talking to the Nazi officer. And he said, "Oh, soon we'll invade New York." And he says, "There's certain parts of New York, Major, I would advise you not to invade."
Yeah. I mean, there's parts of Chicago that are terrifying. I mean, by any metric. And you send troops in there, I will tell you that the mothers and the people who actually own property down there would welcome that with open arms. That's not what's going on here. This is a photo op. This is an opportunity, and it's a terrible photo op. It's troops on the streets of American cities. There are troops on the streets of the U.S. Capitol. Albeit not, maybe they're guard people from getting a bad falafel from one of the food trucks. It's a dangerous precedent, and it's also a way to get us to go, okay, this is a thing now.
That's exactly what this is. This is about normalizing it. I mean, and it's very disturbing. I mean, we might talk about Israel a little bit later, but one of the things about Israel that I noticed the first time I visited, there's a lot of conscripts. And for some reason, they're allowed to carry their Uzis around with them, like at the mall. And they do. And so you'll see like these like young girls, like 20-year-old, admittedly extremely hot girls, with like, and the fact that they have the gun does not make them less hot. They, with an Uzi slinged casually over their shoulders and like pointing, at you, sort of like, which, if you're American and you take the NRA safety test, you're not supposed to do. But basically you just sort of, after a while, you're like, at first you're scared, but then you get used to it. And I think, I can't help but think that a lot of Donald Trump's policies are like testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Oh yeah.
Let's see how this goes.
And that's why I brought up the miniseries.
And then why? Why? To cancel elections, maybe.
Yes. Well, or make sure the right people vote and the wrong people don't.
Right.
That's never been done before. That's why I brought up the rise of Hitler, because Hitler tried things. It's just sort of like, and was stunned at what he could get away with.
He couldn't believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, well, it was sort of like,
every single step of the way, right? The remilitarization of the Saar Valley. Now there's an obscure topic, but still incredibly important, right? Because it was after World War I, Germany had a treaty obligation not to send German troops into Western Germany, into that Saar Valley industrial region, near the French border. They were not allowed to under the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler comes into power, and one of his first things is like, let's see what would happen. Now, under the treaty obligation, France and the UK, as the Allied powers, were authorized and totally permitted to then invade Germany and march to Berlin and overthrow the government and form an occupation authority. Hitler, in his political memoir written in 1944 and 1945, shortly before he died, he admitted that he would have been dead within 3 days had they done that. They didn't have them. They could not have fended off the French army, but at the time. But he bluffed, and he remilitarized the Saar Valley just to see what would happen. Nothing happened, obviously. And it was just one thing after another like that.
Yeah. Well, that's what January 6th felt like to me. It was like Trump saying, go march. And they did. And they damn near got their hands on the ballots, the box with the electoral votes in it. And I mean, what would have happened had they successfully gotten a hold of that and burned it? Not like we don't have, copies, but
Right.
but what would have happened if it had succeeded in a way that was like, holy shit, it's the dog that caught the car, right? I mean, and that's where I believe you're right, Ted. I think we are now. He's testing the waters. He's saying, "Can I send troops? I sent troops to Washington D.C. No one really raised a ruckus.
Not at all."
And I'm just, why?
I mean, no, I mean, look, I'm going to go out there a little further. I mean, what would have, I mean, look, you and I both know, and look, I don't want anything bad to happen to a National Guardsman. I might feel differently about ICE, but let's just, they're goons. I mean, anyway,
Yes.
they're not even real officers as far as I'm concerned. You don't deserve any protection whatsoever if you don't have ID and you don't show your face. You cover yourself with masks. You kidnap people. You don't identify yourself. If someone shoots you, that's on you. But I guess the question is, if that had happened, the first time that there were some sweeping raids, an ICE guy had gotten popped. If the first time, U.S. troops were deployed to Washington, someone had gotten popped. If that happened a few times, that might have, I guess it might have escalated. Got to send more troops. It also might have made Trump and his cronies think twice, yeah?
No, it would open the door and allow them to, it's the burning of the Reichstag. They would allow them to send real troops in and really take over these cities in a military occupation. And I think that may be what they're itching for.
It's a confrontation with the libs, with the Democrats.
Oh yeah, and let's face it, he's going to win.
Well, yeah,
they don't.
Yeah,
they
don't have guns. Don't want to use guns if they have guns.
I was watching. I'm not sure if you've seen this. There's a point here, Ted. I promise. Did you see the documentary on Netflix on Devo?
Devo, the band?
Yeah.
Are We Not Men? No, I didn't. I didn't
We
know
Are
there
Devo.
was one. I'm very excited actually to hear this. Okay.
Oh, okay. Because obviously they're from Akron. They're from small industrial town like our co-host here, Ted Rall. But I didn't know this. Did you know that I think at least two of the members were students at Kent State?
That part I knew. Yeah.
When Kent State, when that went down, that's the salient point, and how that changed the view of everything, and how Americans who were like, yeah, send the troops, maybe shoot one or two of them and that'll do them good. And there were some of that even afterwards, because we're a nation with our, share of assholes. But it made the look of the protests, it made the look of sending troops, National Guard to the protests. It changed it. It changed everything. That's what's going to happen here. Now, the reaction is not going to be horror. And for all of his faults, Richard Nixon and his administration and the American people looked on in horror at the 4 young people. I'd forgotten there were like 30 casualties.
We always talk. That's really good that you brought that up. We always talk about the deaths. Yeah. Also, we forget about the very famous photo of the young woman distraught with her arms up in the air, trying to get help over the body of the one kid. That kid, the guy who died in that picture, he wasn't even a Kent State student. He was a high school student, didn't participate in the protest. He was there to visit campus to see if he wanted to attend. He was caught by a stray bullet, like hundreds of yards away.
That poor family. Well, it also shows you, the aftermath, the hearings. I'm not sure if you remember them, Ted. You were still just a young.
I was 7.
Yeah, I was 11.
Oh, that was very influential. It was May 4th, 1970. And every May 4th, as an Ohio high school student, we used to all wear black armbands to school in memorialization
really?
of what had happened. And we were told every May 4th, you will be suspended or expelled if you wear an armband. And it's like, well, they can't suspend all of you. So we used to all do it anyway.
Well, that's very cool. I like that. And you should have. Yeah. It also showed, I remember the hearings and just how, and the Americans who supported, shoot a few of them and maybe the protests will stop.
Well, like Governor James Rhodes of Ohio, he was
who actually applauded it, right?
Well, he ordered them to do it. He said, I want to see you shoot some of these people.
But you mentioned the kid who was shot, the high school kid, and just how undisciplined and how unmilitary the National Guard actually was. They lowered their weapons, and he said, "Open fire," and they just started shooting in all directions. I mean, it was like, and they also
they were weekend warriors, right? I mean,
yeah, but that just shows that this is not people think that firing a weapon is easy and that you just point it in a direction, you pull the trigger, and that's not how it works generally.
Well, it's not. It's not supposed to be.
Well,
it can be.
Do you think they'd be trained for this? They were not, and opening fire was just so shocking and so despicable. And then it came out that these were weekend warriors. These were tubby little kids trying to make money to go to college, and all of a sudden they said, okay, fire into a crowd. They also broke the #1 rule of the art of war in that the protesters were encircled. Initially, these guys came from 3 directions, kind of like a open-ended box, to move the protesters away. They closed the box.
That's an error that, having attended a number of demonstrations, I see law enforcement and do repeatedly, where they don't allow the people they're trying to get to move to clear. They don't give them an escape route. I mean, by the way, that's part of what happened at Tiananmen Square. With the troops were not there to kill the protesters. I mean, they were willing to, obviously, but it was kind of like, if you have to, do it. But the point was really to clear Tiananmen Square, which is, I don't know if you've been to Beijing, but Scott, I have not. Tiananmen Square is massive. It's much bigger than Times Square, and it just goes and goes and goes. It's bigger than Red Square too.
Oh wow!
It's a big area, and I would say it's probably, I don't know, 10 times the size of Times Square. So it's a big. So anyway, they had plenty of. They just encircled them. Same sort of thing. It happens. Oh, I don't know why they do that. It's like, make it like more of a V than a U. I think a U always has a danger of ending up closing up.
Well, and that's what's going to happen. I mean, in Chicago, you're going to have armed troops on the Magnificent Mile. It's going to be, a photo shoot. Plus, we also have a president with the attention span of a 7-year-old on a sugar rush, right? So look at what happened in LA. That's done. He sent troops for reasons no one can really quite ascertain, other than he could. He did it, and that's to your point, Ted. He sent them to see, what are people going to do. And the
answer is, of course, nothing. Look, it's not the first time U.S. troops have ever been deployed in the streets of U.S. cities. Lincoln did it, but it is bad. And don't forget, it didn't go well even at Katrina, where they were supposedly there to help. I mean, they shot some of the locals. The Onion had that famous headline. National Guardsmen not sure if they're there to kill or help people.
Yeah, I think in Katrina's case, they were there to stop looting and bad guys and bad actors from going into these deserted areas. This is okay. So DC, nobody gives a shit, right? I mean, seriously, have there been any protests? I mean, that you've seen? I mean, serious protests other than someone throwing a sandwich at them? Was that?
Well, that is a tragic loss of a very delicious sandwich that I myself.
It's always the sandwiches that suffer, Ted. Always.
It is. I love the fact that was it Kristi Noem who said or Pam Bondi said this is not funny. I was like, I beg to differ.
Yes. And I'm not going to go to Bondi, Attorney General Bondi, and ask what do you think is funny? Because and we
Like
also
next time you're struggling with a cartoon idea for the Trib, like,
call Gnome up. We'll help someone shooting a dog. That's not funny. Oh, it's hilarious.
Yeah. So speaking of her, oh my God, just parenthetically, did you hear about this thing about Kilmar Albrego Garcia, right? He going through the ringer, because once the U.S. government has its teeth in your ass, it is really hard to extract them. And now, because they've been embarrassed every fucking step of the way, including by the U.S. Supreme Court, now the administration wants to deport him to Uganda. They said
what for what?
Because look, he embarrassed them, not on purpose. Basically, the guy has a green card, and they deported him accidentally, and he wasn't supposed to be, and they wanted to leave him deported, and he didn't want to be deported, so he got counsel, and his wife got counsel, and successfully fought it. So the Trumpies looked like idiots, and rather than just letting it lay, they decided to just keep after him, and so they deported him, remember, to El Salvador. They were like, oh, we'll never bring him back. Well, they had to bring him back because it's like the Supreme Court ordered them to. Yeah. And then he came back, and they're like, oh, we'll never release him. Well, they had to release him because he hasn't done anything wrong. And so now they're like, well, we're going to deport him because he had a court order not to deport him back to El Salvador. So it's like, okay, so we'll send you to Uganda unless you agree to serve time in prison and plead guilty. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. I mean, they're ginning up charges against him. Like they're dragging up an old charge, like of where he was involved in human smuggling, right? I mean, basically, let's face it, we know what he was doing, right? He was in a van with 9 other Latino dudes. Obviously, it's not gang activity. It's just like making a few shekels here, right? Like, I'll give you $500 to drive these dudes. Don't ask any questions. Okay, he's a hustler. That's what he's doing. I mean, it's like, he's not Billy the Kid.
Well, and that's the other thing, the deportation. I mean, everything. This is not, when they say this is not my America, it's not anymore. I mean, this would have been, what I truly and sincerely do not understand, Ted, is there's no significant uprising. The No Kings protest. It's one day. We're going to protest for a day. Well, we said it, and we're on social media.
And we did it on a weekend, so it's convenient for everybody, including the powers that be. They don't have to hear any noises outside their offices, and like it's totally cool, and like we are part of the resistance. Yeah, no, there's no resistance. Look, Scott, don't even get me started here because we only have an hour to do this show. But I got to say, there's no resistance because resistance comes from the left, and there's no left. So that's why there's no resistance. It's like the Democratic Party carefully, basically, yes, they had partners on the right, but this is more if the Democratic Party hadn't gone along with it, it wouldn't have happened. Think about how Republicans use the far right as kind of like their radical ideological vanguard to, first of all, incubate new ideas, which then seep into the mainstream and then are moderated a little bit and become normal GOP politics, but also to gin up the excitement on the right, right? I mean, I look at like the people at Charlottesville as a bunch of fucking maniac racists, but they're also like generating a bunch of ideas that are some of, like, for example, nativism that are now U.S. policy of the Republican Party, right? So on the left, that's what socialists and communists and left libertarians and left anarchists and the old new left in the 1960s, that's what they used to do for the Democratic Party. Think about FDR. Like half of those programs that he came up with, those aren't Democratic Party programs from 1932. Those are watered down Socialist Party Eugene Debs programs from 1916, right?
Yes.
And like unemployment insurance, I have the button. There should be something called unemployment insurance. Those buttons are from the Socialist Party, right? From before FDR ever came along, before he was even governor of New York. So but the Democrats have been obsessed with getting rid of communist socialists, keeping them off the ballots, delegitimizing them. Then
they're losing their minds over the mayoral candidate.
They're even going after
progressives
who are basically just Humphrey liberals, right? Zoran Mamdani is basically a McGovern, okay, except darker skinned. It's like but it's
probably more successful
ideologically, though. Although, anyway, the point, Governor, McGovern was a senator. It's not nothing. But
that's true.
But still, the point is that they're wondering why there's no fucking excitement in their party. Well, because you have no fucking new ideas. Oh, gee, I wonder why you have no ideas. Because you killed the place where the ideas come from. And you have no vanguard, and you have nothing to threaten anyone with. Like, hey, if you don't like our policies, hey, we'll give the car over to the crazy lefties like Ted Rall and see how you like that. They don't have that, right? So that's why there's not going to be any fucking resistance, because resistance has to be organized, and it's the left that does that, or I should say did that. In all other countries, this comes from the left. And so it's not going to change.
That's amazing. Because my wife Janine and I were driving up to Decatur. There was a wilderness area up there. We met our son and his wife and our grandson, and the conversation was exactly this conversation, Ted. It's amazing. Because she said, "What can the Democrats do?" I said, "Well, first of all, you have to include the left. You have to include the far left, the progressives, and bring them back into the tent, and say, okay, yeah, that's an interesting idea. Let's talk about X, Y, Z." But you're part of this group. You're part of this clan. You're part of this party versus shut up. Just shut up. We want to win elections. How are you going to win elections? We're going to offer people the same shit we've been shoveling for the last 10, 20 years.
And that they keep saying they don't want.
Yeah. The Democratic Party registration is plummeting now. Republican registration is up by the same numbers, by the way, 2.5 million. It's kind of weird. But, for all of its faults, and believe me, no one points them out more than me, the myriad of faults of the Republican Party, they still stand for something. Like you said, they still have the crazy far right. That's where some ideas come from. It can become, and some of them get folded into the mainstream. Many of them don't. But the Democratic Party has to start identity politics, throw that down the list and start addressing issues that people actually give a shit about, inflation, housing, health insurance. Those are the issues that people
college
care
costs.
About.
Yeah. It's a lot of bread and butter stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And they're just like,
look, honestly, basic stuff like, cars are really unaffordable, and the rise of EVs is only going to make that worse. Meanwhile, we have protectionism in a bad way. Like, China has a electric vehicle that's beautiful, and it's like barely over $10,000 a car.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And but we're not allowed to have those.
No, and it's insane. So can you have, a far left wing to the Democratic Party? Yeah, it was very effective. And it has been effective. And the Republican Party years ago had a left wing. I know it's weird to think about.
Yeah, but the liberal Republicans, the Rockefeller Republicans.
Yeah, I have a button from the 1988 Republican convention, and Republicans for choice. I mean, it's a little ironic, but there it is. So, are we hurtling towards? Is this the dystopian? It sure feels like it, Ted. I mean, it's just like by any metrics, I think you'd have to answer that question. Yeah, we're heading towards catastrophe. We're heading towards dystopia. We're heading towards totalitarian, regime. And
we should define we should define this a little bit, right? So, I mean, I think, look, we have a regime that has fascist tendencies. I think that's fair to say right now. There's authoritarianism, which I think we've had for a while, where you kind of have, for example, if you don't think we have authoritarianism, go through a TSA checkpoint. It's scary. And authoritarianism is a system that rules in large part based on fear rather than compliance. In other words, it doesn't convince you that you should wear your seatbelt. It tells you if you don't wear your seatbelt, something bad's going to happen to you. That's authoritarianism. Now, totalitarianism is very comprehensive. So where the government insinuates itself into every detail of your everyday life. So, even like, so for example, in China, which is definitely a totalitarian system, there's like, you might live in an apartment building, and let's say you pick up someone at a bar and you want to bring them home. You're probably not going to do that because there's a block cadre who sits in the lobby of your building and will ask, who's that? And who, what are you doing? And blah, 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 blah. And if you get them past there, then there's there's the floor cadre or the floor lady who does the same thing. And there's cameras everywhere. And all of that's tied into the government. And literally you're going to be asked like, hey, who did you take home last night? That's a totalitarian system. I think it's hard for a system for a culture as disorganized as Americans to put totalitarianism together. If you look at the societies that have had it, Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, Maoist China, those are, societies that are much more less individualistic and less anarchic than ours. I think it's culturally hard, but I definitely think in terms of authoritarianism and fascism, shut up and all the vestiges of fascism are expansive militarism. Trump is weak on that, which is interesting. But it's you also have scapegoating. Now Trump's big on that. It's all the migrants. It's the illegals. It's the Democrats. It's the liberals who are all socialists. The name calling and all that. That's very, very toxic. It's also, interestingly, the mix of the Mussolini-like mix of corporate business with government, which Trump is super interested in. Scott, just yesterday, the U.S. government acquired 10% of Intel, the biggest microchip maker in the United States, right? I mean, that's socialistic, but it's also kind of fascist.
And in fact, I know Michael Schmerkonish, who I draw for his Saturday show on CNN. He also has a show on Sirius XM rather. And a poll today, and it's granted unscientific, but he gets tens of thousands of responses to this thing. Was that right or wrong? And like 80% of respondents said this is wrong to buy Intel. But Trump doesn't care.
I'm okay as a leftist with nationalization of let's say, for example, a company let's say steals people's homes during a mortgage crisis, even though they're completely up to date on their mortgage payments, but just says, oh, we didn't get your payment, la, 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 and then steals your house. They go rogue and they do that to hundreds of thousands of people. We would call a company like that, I don't know, Bank of America, because they did that. Yes. I think you could nationalize a company like that because you don't want it to go out of business, but you could just say, you know what, you guys don't get to have your own control, your own C-suite anymore. Sorry. I think you could do that. I think also if you had like a Chrysler situation where a major company's about to go under, let's say Intel were that company, you could say we're taking it over because we need it. You could do that. I don't think the government should be buying companies, although it certainly has happened. There was a phone company called satellite phone company called Iridium. It was really unprofitable, but the CIA really needed it because you could see why they might need satellite phones in remote places. There's nothing else works, so they bought Iridium. So
that's an American company.
It is
American government.
Well, it's as American as it gets. It's owned by you and me.
Oh, nice.
The CIA has an unlimited budget. It does not have a budget. It's literally. Is
that true?
It is true. Yeah, it's not. It's literally whatever they want. They just get.
Oh, that'd be nice, huh?
Definitely.
Boy, when I worked on a newspaper, my editor never offered that.
Shocking. Maybe you should have gone to work for a magazine. That would have been
it. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you read that latest book about Vanity Fair. and like what's the company that owned Vanity Fair?
Advanced Publications.
They were that, but before that, God, what was
the Newhouse family.
Yeah. They had more money than God, and it's amazing, like the abuses that went on.
Oh my gosh, no, we used to, because I worked for the Birmingham News for 13 years, which is in the newspaper division of Newhouse. That is Advanced Publications, and yeah, what's the magazine division called? It's not Advance. It's oh my God, Ted.
It'll come back.
Okay, yeah, it'll come wandering back at 2 this morning.
And I'm typing it in right now to look it up.
But the newspaper wing of the Newhouse media empire, we didn't have things like this. But what they did at the magazines, $10,000 lunches.
Condé Nast. That's
Condé Nast. That was it. Condé Nast. I mean, we would hear tell of our brethren in the other part of the company that would literally go for $10,000 lunches. Can you imagine?
Oh. Well, I can imagine. I've been to $10,000 lunches. So
have you? Where?
When I was at the bank. Yeah.
What were those? What? Okay. I gotta tell you,
it's the booze, Scott. It's the wine. It's like people order like a $2,000 bottle of wine. That's how it happens. And then people have 3 bottles of $2,000 wine.
Okay. Well, then that makes a little more sense, because they were this book. I mean, how these editors lived. What were the magazines? They were Vanity Fair. Was it Harper's Bazaar?
Well, the New Yorker, Architectural Digest.
But a lot of the fashion,
Vogue, of course, Vogue.
Yes, Vogue. That was the biggest one.
Yeah, Anna Wintour, right, and Wired, and like so. Yeah,
Wired. I love that magazine. Oh my God.
It was a good magazine. I always wanted to draw cartoons for them. I was sad that I never got to.
You just wanted the $10,000 lunch.
Well, yeah, I would have actually rather. It's really funny. I would much rather have $1,000 in my pocket than $10,000 in my stomach. But
well, I don't agree. Yeah, or just give you one of the bottles of wine to take home
and sell.
Well, okay, so let's shift gears quickly, because I know you wanted to touch on this. We've got about 15 minutes left, and that's what's happening in Gaza today. Now it's officially, I poo-pooed you. I retract my poo-poo. I think I've been
de-poo-pooing.
I'm de-poo-pooing you, and that is with now what's happening in Gaza. There's some areas of Gaza now are under what's famine. Officially designated as famine. Famine, by the way, is completely and totally 100% now caused by humans. There's no longer
the crops failed.
The crops failed, or we got a bunch of locusts.
The Bohemian ass beetle.
Bohemian ass beetle. Yeah, exactly. This is almost. Famines are caused by human beings, and that's what's happening in Gaza. The Netanyahu government has now gone too far for Scott Stantis, which means it's gone too far for most supporters of Israel.
Oh, for sure. Because I mean, look, Scott, we're having this discussion now. It's 22 months after October 7th. And I was writing as of basically a week after October 7th, saying that the Israelis were already going too far. So I mean, basically it's a slow process. A lot of people, it's almost like you can see the political where you lie ideologically, like based on how long it's taken people to become uncomfortable with what Israel's doing. And I think by the time we got here, it's like, I'm not kidding. Once you've lost Scott Stantis, you're done. I mean, the last poll was about 2-3 weeks ago. Gallup poll showed 31% approval rating for Israel in the U.S. I didn't think I'd ever live to see a number like that.
No, that's astounding.
I would doubt that it'll be 25, as high as 25% the next time that poll is taken.
And Ted and I started talking, and you looked up recent quotes. I saw interviews from stories, and I remember interviews and stories from settlers from 20, 25 years ago on the West Bank, Israelis, talking about Palestinians very much like Nazis talked about Jews. Now, let me ask, this is maybe too big a topic for this tiny podcast, Ted, but How do people not see that irony? How do people use that?
They do.
And
They do.
the most telling quote was calling the Palestinians animals.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that sounds familiar. And once you dehumanize someone to the point where you can call them an animal, you can kill them with impunity. You can starve them. You don't care that their babies are dying. You don't care that you indiscriminately bomb their areas, or that there's violence, state violence in those areas, killing people who are innocent. Now, and this is language. I'm not making this up. Ted can.
I sent you a bunch of the quotes yesterday,
and those are recent quotes. Those are quotes post October 7th. There are quotes from 10, 20, 30 years ago where Israelis use the kind of language.
Let me share a few. Netanyahu, October 18th, 2023. We will not allow humanitarian assistance in the form of food and medicine from our territory to the Gaza Strip. Giora Eiland, former IDF Major General and National Security Council head, special advisor to Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, after October 7th. Gaza started a war with us today. When you are at war with another state, you don't feed them, you don't provide them with electricity or gas or water or anything else. President Isaac Herzog, still the president of Israel, it's an entire nation out there that is responsible. Actually, Isaac, Gaza is not a nation, and that's part of the problem here. Nations have to be more responsible. It's not true, this rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved. It's absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat. But we're at war, and we will fight until we break their backbone. Let me find the animals thing.
It's down a ways. It's probably down 10.
Here we go. It's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, October 9th. I have ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly.
Yeah. Once you start using language like that, once you start defining fellow human beings, I just was reading an article about how many Christian churches now are starting to preach against empathy. Because
I don't know. Can you really call yourself Christian, considering that empathy was literally, I think, seriously, one of the things that Christ repeatedly talked about? If you could only talk about one key Christian value, that's the big one, right?
Well, we have an issue down here in Alabama now, and other Bible Belt states where they want to put the 10 Commandments in all the classrooms. They tried to do this in Texas, for instance. You never hear these assholes say, we want to put the Beatitudes in, be kind to treat your neighbor as you'd want to be treated yourself, feed the hungry, clothe the poor. You never hear these assholes ever mention putting that up, New Testament stuff. They're all Old Testament stuff that Jesus, if you've read the Bible, said, those 10 commandments no longer apply. There are 2 commandments now. Honor
that
God.
helps explain the Israelis because they're Old Testament only.
They are Old Testament only. The fact that they, like as you said, Ted, if you're Israel and you've lost Scott Stantis, you've lost. And
what's the tipping point? Is it just the grinding for you?
The grinding. You do what you. I thought that was an act of war, was certainly an act of aggression, the October 7th attacks. So you have to respond accordingly. I didn't disagree with going in there as a military operation, but then there's a bunch of human beings in the way. And yes, modern war, as we learned in World War II, is now civilians are not safe.
And by the way, there's no way. I think for people who don't live in a metro or haven't really been to a big city, they don't understand when they say, well, Hamas has embedded itself among the people. Okay, well, even if they didn't want to, they couldn't, because it's basically the same size and density as Manhattan. So if you had like the government Eric Adams of Manhattan, and I would be fine with a foreign force coming in and overthrowing him. It's like, it's like it would be impossible to attack the mayor's offices without killing lots of innocent New Yorkers, because it's just everything, we have buildings here, a lot of them that are 50, 60, 70 stories high. It's dense. And the Gaza Strip and Manhattan are about the same size, and the pre-war populations are about the same. So of course you can't go after these people surgically. It's not going to work. Not to mention they didn't do that.
Well, yeah, you can't search, when they say surgical bombing and all that, you just have to kind of giggle, because if you understand what a bomb is a big, okay.
Right.
Think of, and then try to think of that.
Well, you see, everyone's seen the pictures from the Gaza Strip. I mean, 70% of everything's been completely flattened. Scott, what do you make of the fact that, like, when an area has been pummeled in Gaza, that there's special squads of Israeli IDF soldiers who go in and then demolish the remaining surviving buildings?
I mean, that's anger, isn't it? That's just pure, unfiltered anger.
But they're given the dynamite. You know what I mean? Like, they get this. It's not they're pulling it out of their ass. This is policy, right?
No, but it is. But that's my point, is that it's irrational. Anger is irrational, and no one. And I've said this how many times, Ted, on this podcast, that no one makes a good decision angry. It's it's stomping on an anthill when you get bitten by ants, and you just keep stomping on it because you're so angry. That's childish.
You don't think you don't think it's like a policy to basically make it like so?
I'm saying the policy is childish.
So in genocide, the formal definition, you actually don't have to even kill anyone to commit genocide. The killing has nothing to do with it. It's about erasing the presence of a people from a place. And so, like, you could, for example, kill 0 people and commit genocide simply by making it impossible for people to live in a place. That happened kind of recently in Nagorno-Karabakh, in Armenia, where in Azerbaijan, where the ethnic Armenians were basically driven out. Finally, they weren't really killed in significant numbers, but the point is, it's been genocided. It's been ethnically cleansed. Ethnic cleansing is genocide. And I think this is ethnic cleansing. I think it's like they're making it so that even though there will be Palestinian survivors, they will have no place to live, that they nothing to go back to.
And my sense is that, again, hey, not crazy about saying this, but I think you were correct. This is going to be a land grab by Israel. I don't think you're going to see a Palestinian Gaza again. You're going to see Gaza.
Well, not if the Israelis have their way. Now,
not the current Israel. Don't forget, there are protests in Israel. There are a majority of Israelis
not against the genocide, though. Only against. It's only to get they want the war to end because they want the hostages back, and they know that the war. I mean, they're right. I mean, obviously, you don't bomb the place where hostages are being held and expect them to be alive when you get there, right? So they want that. They care about the hostages. They don't care about the Palestinians.
I don't know that that's true. I think that the polls coming out of Israel have shown a lack of support now. For the military, it's up to like 60+% oppose the actions now.
Because of the hostages.
But when you say that, but I think it's probably multi-tiered.
If you look at the protests, if you look at seriously, Scott, when you have a chance, just go look at the YouTube, coverage of the protest. You're not going to see signs that say stop the genocide or support the Palestinians or free Gaza or anything like that. You're going to see
you're not
signs of the hostages, like release the hostages, Israeli flags to indicate that they're patriotic. For sure. I mean, I'm very disappointed by this. There used to be a tradition of liberal Israelis, but Israeli liberalism is as dead as the American left.
I think you're probably right. And certainly voting patterns would show that. Where's the opposition? Where's the political? I mean, you would think that the left and the opposition parties would be going nuts and demanding an election.
Well, they would love one, but they obviously there's parties. There's Labor is opposed to Likud, and they're out of power. I mean, and October 7th just moved Israeli society further to the right politically. So it's a very reaction. I mean, in Netanyahu's cabinet, he's the liberal, and he's a fucking maniac.
Yeah. So what happens? I mean, this is going to continue until you have a change of leadership in Israel, and the only way that's going to happen is if they acquiesce to have an election. And
well, there's another way that can happen. I mean, Scott, what do you think about? I mean, look, Israel would not be defenseless if the U.S. severed all military aid at this point. I mean, Israel has a massive army. It's a nuclear power. I mean, it has an excellent intelligence apparatus. I mean, why? I mean, I think the next step, I think we're going to be within 6 months. We are maybe less, maybe more, but we're going to see around that time frame, the U.S. is going to stop all weapons shipments to Israel. That'll be it, because Donald Trump knows how to do anything. He knows how to read a poll, and the polls show that the American people aren't into this anymore, and MAGA world is not into this at all.
Yeah. And could they, should they? Yeah. I think just the threat of that would do wonders.
I think so too.
But
it would wake them up. I mean, I'm sure some of them would be like, fuck the Americans, we'll do it on our own. But I mean,
well, they do have a healthy, vibrant, robust, diversified economy as well. I mean, they've been very smart in creating that. So could they be self-sustaining without the billions of dollars infused from the American government? I mean, that would be a hit, but I suspect they could still sustain themselves somewhat
for a while.
Yeah. What happens? Go ahead.
But I do think, I think there's multiple things happening at the same time. Like Israel is becoming a pariah state between all the international courts and the UN and all the countries, in the world that are recognizing Palestine, including Canada, Australia, even Germany is moving in that direction now. We're going to rapidly get to the point where if you're a polite company and you tell someone like, oh, I just took a job at an Israeli company, you might be shunned by a polite company. It might be about as popular as working for ICE. So it's
Sputnik.
Or Sputnik, right? Well,
yeah, you got shunned.
And they had trouble, and Sputnik had trouble recruiting talent for that reason.
Sputnik, but for those who don't know, was the Russian. How would you put it? Russian supported, Russian financed.
It was a Russian media company.
Okay. Which actually did some great radio. I missed this. I missed the shows because you guys did some great shows. Okay, so going forward, I don't see an election anytime soon. Netanyahu, don't forget, Netanyahu's also
holding on to his own ass.
Well, because he wants to stay out of jail in Israel for corruption, which he's guilty of.
Correct.
just to finish the thought.
Extremely. Yeah.
Completely. That's why Trump ran for re-election so hard. He doesn't want to go to jail.
Right.
And may never leave office. We don't know.
Well, I am worried about that. The only thing we have working for us is that he is old. So is he really going to? He's older now than Biden was when Biden had to drop out. Obviously he's in better shape than Biden, unfortunately, but he's not going to be with us forever. But I think he's got to be worried about the lawfare, the Democratic lawfare resuming. Speaking of which, I wanted to do. We did promise to talk about this, and I do want to get you wanted to talk about this. So everyone's favorite walrus-like mustachioed neocon warmonger, John Bolton, who's been admirably incorrect about every foreign policy crisis in U.S. history. He got his house raided by the FBI the other day under suspicion that he basically retained classified documents. I guess it's kind of required now when you have access to classified documents in Washington that you take them home with you after you leave, kind of like
apparently.
A souvenir.
Yeah.
So Bolton's notice he didn't deny that he did that at all. So anyway, so Bolton got raided. It's widely viewed as Trump's retribution against his enemies, because Bolton became a critic of Trump. Ironically, Bolton criticizes Trump for not being warmongery or aggressive enough. Now, there's considered to be a long list of anti-Trumpies who are considered to be in the crosshairs. Former CIA Director John Brennan, former FBI Director James Comey, current New York Attorney General Letitia James, who basically just had her $500 million judgment against Trump overturned. There's a weaponization working group that wants to list people like Anthony Fauci, Liz Cheney. Scott, I am torn here. I hate all of Trump's enemies as much as I hate Trump.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I really do. I mean, I fucking hate John Bolton. I hate John Brennan, James Comey. They're all turds. They push
love
this.
Cheney, though.
Oh yeah, Liz Cheney. She's a darling. So and frankly, I have my major problems with Fauci too, because he's kind of like a version of Dr. Pat. I mean, basically making money off the shit that he's supposed to advising. Shouldn't be doing that. So how do I mean, do you just watch, do you sit back? It is like you brought up the Night of the Long Knives. The Line of the Long Knives, for people who don't know, is when Hitler came to power in 1933. He had the brown shirts who were the SA, and he had the SS. The SA were not as personally loyal to him as the SS. So after he came to power, he's like, I don't know, the SA might be getting too big for their britches. So he had their top leadership arrested and killed, including Ernst Röhm, who was discovered in bed with a boy when he was arrested. So that was awkward. But anyway, the Night of the Long, so it was a purge, right? Like basically consolidation of power when he did that. That's one of those things like, oh, Hitler kills a bunch of like bad Nazis. Should we care? This is kind of like that, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Because, I mean, look at the kid who shot the United Healthcare executive, and the overwhelming number of people in polls have come out and said, yeah, absolutely. These guys are monsters. We're okay if we don't like the people. And so right now, the enemies of Trump are people that you don't like, people that I probably wouldn't care for. But again, this comes back to the early part of this podcast, Ted. Donald Trump is testing to see, can I get away with this? If I persecute, John Bolton, I was about to say Michael Bolton, but either one, what will the response be? And if it's tepid, well, let's go on to other stuff. Let's get bigger and bolder and badder. You and I have been critics. I mean, we fear that we could be in crosshairs at some point. We're way down the list. But are we off the list or on? We're not off the list at all.
No, I would like to be off the list, but I think I'm on the list.
Oh, you're definitely on the list. And I think that I know I would be. I mean, probably even very high on the list, because I was a Republican.
Yeah,
I'm a traitor.
You're a class traitor. It's true.
Yeah. And so is this going to continue? Well, if people don't say anything, if people don't get angry that they're doing this, and all they're doing, I mean, and they think that if they post to Instagram or X or Truth Social, that they're actually doing something, and they're not. No. You're throwing you have to get out in the streets. You have to do it every fucking day. Yes. You have to find out. You're in Chicago and you hear about an ICE raid at, the post office downtown in Chicago. You have the ability to organize thousands of people to go down there, block the streets, ring the post office, and don't allow the ICE agents to get through. Force them into action. That's as much the book of Martin Luther King and Gandhi as you can get. Provoke them to violent action, to show what monsters they are. Correct. That's what, that's kind of like, that's how the civil rights movement acted, right? I mean, you had well-dressed young men, usually men, wearing a suit and tie, sitting at the luncheon counter, just wanted a hamburger. And then these racist, inbred, idiot fucking Southern sheriffs coming in with their dogs and their fire hoses and brutalizing them. That entered middle America's television sets, and it shocked them. And they're like, they just want a hamburger. Yeah. You should have a right in America to go buy a hamburger. So the Bolton and Senator Schiff is in the crosshairs too. Don't forget, from California. Oh, right. Another asshole. Yeah, not a great guy. Bullshit Russia Gate narrative. Why did Ted? Okay, real quick. We always go down these rabbit holes, but just from a historic standpoint, historians are going to look back on this era and go, did they have a lot of lead in the pipes? Because Americans were fucking idiots. But with the Russia, Trump gets impeached for Russiagate, which now we know to be large part false. 90% of it was just not true. They could have gone after Trump with the emoluments provision of the Constitution. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they go after the one that actually they could, what I think most thinking people could go, yeah, he's guilty of that.
Yeah, he was guilty of that. I mean, hell,
still is
brazenly. I mean,
now more than ever.
Yeah, he's made like $10 billion because he's president. I mean, he just scarfed up a bunch of Bitcoin recently, right?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Anyway, I think the truth is that the Democrats knew that they all do it too. And it's like the emoluments grift is bipartisan. Think about the Biden crime family. Think about Nancy Pelosi and her investments. Think about Marjorie Taylor Greene, who went from having $700,000 a few years ago to having $22 million now. I know she's super intelligent, but still.
Oh yeah, you can tell by looking at her.
Yeah. I mean, nothing says intelligence like looks like that. So the point is that, like, I think that's why they didn't do that. They couldn't, because it's like it would attract attention to them.
Wow, that's a spin I hadn't thought of, but you're absolutely positively 100% correct. Yep.
Well, I always like to end on an up. So
yeah,
a compliment from Scott is an up. So thank you, Scott. Much appreciated. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We're going to try to come up with a schedule, Scott. So let's do that.
Let's do that.
The DMZ America podcast, we're roughly once a week. We're going to try to be once a week and
a minimum
at a predictable time.
Yes.
I kind of like the weekends, I will say.
I do too. We can luxuriate. Well, look at us. We had our coffee.
True. And
fed
also
my dog.
There's a lot of people watching us on the weekends. I mean, the news has really, Saturday used to be a dead news day.
Oh my God, Ted, you would, if
the skinny little newspaper.
You would
ads.
fight our editorial writers would fight tooth and tongue not to be in the Saturday edition.
No one reads it, but that's not true anymore. If you look at the stats on internet traffic and news consumption in general, Saturday's a big fucking day.
Well, and this is
Monday's
Sunday,
the slowest day of the week.
And with the secularization of America, where people, this is your church. Right. I heal you. Yeah. Say amen, Ted. Give me an amen.
I want snakes, Scott. I want snakes. All right, Scott.
You come down here.
It's coming. It's time for the audio portion of the audio show.
Ted, if you ever get down here, we'll take you to Sand Mountain to see the snake handling.
Ooh, okay, I'm in. I'm getting online and buying my tickets right after this. All right, bye everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah. Come on, we're going to Uganda, maybe El Salvador. We're all gonna be together at the little re-education camps. Bye.